Hey, good afternoon. I'm going to talk to you about building forms. We're going to focus on multi-record forms, subforms, and sibling forms so that you can choose the right form type to support the purpose of the form that you're creating. My name is Stephanie Zasekina, and I am glad that you're here. So we're going to talk primarily about forms based on multi-record tables because that encompasses most of the table types in the system. You can kind of have tables about cases and main entities, and then multi-records. So thinking about anything that you're storing multiple records of, like documents and case notes, progress notes, placements, adoptions. Most things in the system, you're going to have multi-records, and there's many records to the one main record type, like the child or the family that you're working with. And there's a couple different ways that you can build forms based on those types of tables. So we're going to talk about those to kind of clarify that. Then we're going to talk about the term subforms and how they're used, why you would use those forms, how to identify them, and how to set up and manage those. And same thing for sibling forms. So it's another term that's kind of thrown around and it causes some confusion. And so we're going to discuss that as well so that we can give real concrete examples for them. So forms based on multi-record tables are going to show, they're generally set up in one of two ways, where you can look at all the records at one time. So you can see an overview of all the communications at one time, or some subset of those communications. Or you might see them on an edit form where you're asking, I guess the anticipation is for a smaller set, but the end user will be able to answer all of them at the same time. So you might ask this in a situation where, how many children do you have? Oh, I have 3 children. Great. Now I've dropped down 3 records to allow us to enter in the name, the birth date, and other identifying information that we want to collect about each of the 3 children, and we know what to expect. The other option for multi-record tables, though, is to enter them one at a time. And that's for things like a communication. You're not really communicating 3 communications at one time. That's a one a day or one at a time type of a situation. So you're adding just one more record, or you might be editing that very specific record. And you can also create one at a time forms that are we call detail forms that show more detailed information. The adoption or the placement record are great examples of that, where we might want to see kind of the status, who is relating to that adoption, and when did it start, when did it end. On a detail form, we might want to know lengths of time. We might want to know discharge reason. We might want to know who's working with that family specifically for that placement. So lots of other details that can be shared. So I've got a couple of screenshots here, and then we'll jump into some actual systems to look at this. But a multi-record view form sort of looks like this, where you've got, this is an overview form, and it's basic information about this home study record. Here over here, you can see, so this is one record, and this is the second record. Both records comprise the same types of information, right? We want to know what type of home study this is, what stage of the home study we're at, who worked this home study, the home study document for each of these records, and we can have many, many records. But sometimes we might want to look at this specific one or edit this specific one, and we can use the 2 links here. These are different forms that are going to allow us to look at it one at a time. Same with this. We wouldn't add necessarily 3 home studies at a time. We would add 1 home study record at a time, and you can do that through the add form. So let's jump in. So here, speaking of the add form, click in here and we can say, hey, this is another updated home study and we're sending it today. So very basic information that we're entering, but we're going to share some information with this family today about this brand new home study. And this is an auto action that's showing up that's saying, hey, we're starting the home study process. We can confirm and send that email. The next thing that we would look at here is on a multi-record, when a multi-record form is set up for a multi-record table, if it is set as an edit form as well, it'll look like this. This is my other example, where we're asking the family on the application form at this point, how many children or how many people do you have living in your home? They're generally going to have a number of people living that they can answer all at the same time. So this is an appropriate use of this type of form. So I've selected 2 here, and then I can go in when I'm actually on the form and enter these specific pieces of information. Just to see it in person, this is how it looks. So how many people do I have living in my home? Got 2 people, and I can start typing in the information. Right? Some of your multi-record view forms can be set up to be filtered. So for example, in our communications record here, we want to see case notes, those communication records that come in that are specified as case note up at the top because they're more important to us. Rather than all the communications that come in are all stored down here. So there will be some redundancy in what we see potentially, but we're pulling out the case notes to view at the top just for visibility. If I show you this in person, if I were to add a communication record, I could set as in person, set the topic type as case note. This is a test for this webinar. I can add all my notes. When I save this record, we're taking first to the detail form, which is right at this point, this is a one at a time form. So we're looking very specifically, did we enter this communication correctly? I can go back to the overview form where I'm looking at all of the communications that have been presented for this family in the entirety of their case. And I can see this communication that I added is up here. And you know what I would say is that the way that I have this filtered, because they're generally sorted ascending, is that I actually have put case notes only in here and excluded the case notes from this one. Okay, so depending on your setup, you may have more visibility to all the communications down at the bottom. That's something that your team can really play with. Oops, excuse me. So the filters can also be used on the edit forms. And when you're setting this up in the system, this is going to be more the fields or the data entry that is automatically calculated. So this is an example of an application form where we've asked up here at the top the siblings for parent 1 or applicant 1, how many siblings they have. Well, they have 0. They've not lived anywhere. But app 2 or parent 2 has 1 sibling. And so I've got the drop down here to enter that information. When I submit this form as the end user, I've actually set this form up to tell Sam that this form relates to parent 2. So they don't have, the end user doesn't have to specify parent 2, but because they entered in a section that we described as relating to parent 2, and we told Sam to automatically enter it, it will enter that information. All right. Now we're going to talk about subforms. And subforms are used a lot of the times to display multi-record tables. So the information that I showed first actually relates a lot to subforms. But there's another use for subforms that I've seen in play a lot, and that is just for formatting or styling the form and organizing the fields in a way that makes sense for a family. Sometimes you may say, hey, how's your health? And that could be on the medical information. It could be on the case table. I'd probably recommend putting it on the medical information, but then below that, we might have subforms that are asking questions about how many diagnoses you have, what kinds of medications are you taking. That type of information would be multiple different subforms, but the subform at the top, we could either start the form and initiate that form off the medical, but if it is in an application form that's longer and maybe you're asking other types of questions and now suddenly you're asking questions about medical. So you've asked maybe on that, like on this previous screen where we're asking about the siblings, maybe the next question is about medical information. We might want a subform that just has a basic assessment of health, of that person's assessment of themselves, of their health, and then so that's a subform with a couple of questions. And then another subform that talks specifically about the exams, or excuse me, the diagnoses, and then another subform specifically about the medications that they might be taking. Okay. All subforms, though, must be part of a container form, or they must be included on another form. They're not a standalone, hence the name subform, right? It must be part of something. And when you're building these subforms or adding them into your forms, they are always shown on the form customizer underneath any fields that are on the main form or the containing form. So let me show you what that looks like. So I'm going to go to this application form. And first I'm going to have to log in here in order to do that. So let me jump in and then I'm going to refresh this page. And now that I'm logged in, once I hit no begin form, I get this small edit link here. So this marital status information right here is on the main form. I could add other fields to this main form, and I'll go ahead and do that just to give you an idea of like where these fields go, so you can see that pretty clearly. So we might add a family field. So we're talking about marriage. And maybe we're now also interested in like who's there, what's the church that they attend. All right, so we've got that information in here because it kind of sort of goes together. Probably would move that into a different spot, but I think you get the gist. And what you can see, what Sam does consistently is add fields to the bottom of the form. It will act that way for subforms as well. So going back to our subforms conversation is, these are subforms. So prior marriages, I could have 1, I could have 10. Hopefully not, but that was judgy and not necessary. But you could have multiple marriages, right? Especially between 2 parents. So this would list multiple. Same thing with children living in your home. You might have 1, you might have 0, you might have 10. On and on, you can see the consistency with the subforms. What I want to kind of point out to you is that each subform has these dotted ant lines around. And so they can call out. You can also edit each of the subforms individually. So you can look at just that information in order to customize the form. You might also remove that subform if you no longer want it. If these details right here are on the case table, this is kind of the example that I'm talking to you about formatting. This is not necessarily multi-records, right? I live in one home. It's in the city. The type of residence is a single family home. Do I rent or own? I rent this home. Do I have any pets? Yes. Do I have a cat? Yes. Right? So it's kind of single information. If I add a dog to my family, I'm now going to change this information, but that doesn't, unless something happens with my cat, that doesn't change that the cat exists. It doesn't change the location of my home. So I'm not needing to overwrite or add to history. I'm now I am adding to history. Excuse me, but I mean not overwriting and retaining some prior value. I'm now saying at this point, I have a cat and a dog, okay? And so this is an example of a table or a subform that's used on here, and we're starting to ask information about the case or the family, specifically in between other subforms, okay? Here is another subform. Subforms, when you add them, are always added at the bottom. Just like if I added a new field to this specific subform, it would be added at number 8. And then I can use the drop downs to reorganize them. So let's go on in here. Okay, so again, I'm kind of re-showing you here on this screen what a subform is when we're looking at, instead of the form customizer view, but we're actually looking at a form that contains a subform. We see them here. This here is exactly the same screen that I was just showing you, but this is the end user view of that screen. This right here is that same description where it's a formatted. It's a subform rather is used for formatting rather than to display a multi-record table. And so the last thing that we'll talk about here in this webinar is about sibling forms. And sibling forms are going to create a duplicate of the form that you're working on, and the two are linked. So if the form that you're working on, you make changes to that form in the way of formatting, it's immediately copied to the sibling form. And there's a couple reasons why you would have this set up in the system. So the first and most primary reason is so that your SAM users can view what end users like your families or other clients see through public forms. So it's a direct copy of that information, and it gives you a view internally. The second thing that happens is when you have when you use multi-record form standard setup or multi-record standard form setup, it's lengthy names. This is a setup that allows you from a multi-record table to create the overview, the add edit, and the details form. Keeping them connected as a sibling link, especially at the beginning of building, allows you to build all 3 forms with the fields that you want displayed quickly and easily, because it builds those, it adds all of the fields on all 3 forms simultaneously. So it's going to save you a lot of time doing that. There is a moment in time when you might decide, I now no longer want it because I want my add and my edit and my details forms to actually have different field setups than I have when I'm just displaying kind of an overview of all the communications. And when I jump into the system, I'll talk to that a little bit more. The last option that I can think of, kind of in preparation for this webinar for using sibling forms, is when you've got a multi-part form, like a post-adoption report that is entered by the family, and you want to step them through piece by piece so they don't feel overwhelmed and they know that they've got 5 parts to fill out. But then at the end, they want to see, you want to show them everything that they have entered and completed on that post-adoption report, so that frankly that they could go and edit that information or backtrack and again edit that information. You can use sibling forms to set up the individual forms that would be set up as one at a time. So I'm doing one post-adoption report at a time, but then create a sibling form of that that's set as a subform to be displayed on the full view form. So, and my last note on here is to say that sibling forms and their counterpart form that it originates from, they can have different form properties. So I'll show you in the example of the post-adoption reports for one of our clients, their form is set up as a one at a time, what the family, the end user sees. And then we take all of those, we've created sibling forms for each of those individual parts and combine them onto a single report, or excuse me, a single form that the family can view. So let's go in and start looking at some of these. All right. So first things first that I want to show you is kind of what an internal view looks like. And go over here. So this application form here is an internal view of the public form application, or the public application form. So you see it's got this particular order. It looks just like your regular internal forms in SAM look. But if we were to look over here at the public form and log into the application form, we'll see that the end user actually has quite different information or a different visibility. So they're looking at it and they've got the password, the applicant name. If I had logged in as this family, which I'll do now, and copy their email and go here, log in, we'll see that their information is displayed. Okay, so they've got that password, their name, all of this information is in here, and it matches what is over here on the internal view. The internal sibling form needs to be set up for public forms in order for them to be shown on checklists. So here, over on their checklist here, right here, this application receive date, when the application is done, this is a setting on the configuration. If I click here, this is going to take me to that internal view. Okay, the same thing. So the setting for that, if I jump over here and I'm going to go to the end where I get this little edit link, is going to be under advanced options. And right now I see view internal sibling form because I already have it set up. If I did not have it yet set up, it would show create internal sibling form for this form. And you click that, SAM does its thing, and then when you refresh and click advanced options, this will be there and it will open up to an internal sibling form. So it lets you know what this form is based off of. And it shows you same thing, same information here, what it's derived from. And then I could unlink it. I don't want to do that at this point, but in some situations you will unlink, like your multi-record forms setup. Let's see. The other thing that I want to show you here is the this agency here has these post-adoption reports. So when I walk in and click the edit form, I'm going to be taken right now to a one at a time setup for the post-adoption reports. Okay, as I submit through, I'll write a test note here. It'll take me from one part of, test and test, one part of the form to the next part of the form. I don't think the setup is quite right yet, so but it can take you through. At the conclusion of this form, it will take us to a full view form where I can see over here. Let's see, right here. So I'm going to click. There's the daily life subform, and it's noted as a sibling. So I'm going to show you this real quick. So it's a sibling of the daily life form. It's got the health information. It's also a sibling form, on and on. They're all connected down to where we're ending up with a full post-adoption report that the end user will complete for your agency. That's what I have today to share with you about these different types of forms. There's lots of different terms that are important to use. Should you ever need any support though in completing these forms and getting them set up for your team, you can always reach us at support@inreachsolutions.com. And honestly, we're looking forward to serving you. Take care.